happy 2023, friends! It's a new year, which means we have 365 new days to cast on all kinds of projects. But before we do that, maybe you should take a look at what I did in 2022. Specifically, all the knitting I did in 2022. I don't know if this is a thing you do on Ravelry, but I like to put myself a challenge on the projects page. And I challenged myself to make 15 projects in 2022, and as you will see, I can check off the 15 projects and I'll walk you through them. I'll start with some of the smaller projects I made before we tackle this mountain. First off, you saw these ones. These are my puppy fur Victorian gloves. I have now turned over the cuff because it's a little bit tricky to put them on elbow length when you're already wearing a coat. But they work like this just as fine. If you per accident haven't seen that video, it will be in the corner over here and also linked in the description. I made this on 1.5mm needles with some hand-spun lace Shangora yarn made from the fur of my own puppy Sitka. I have also been knitting a couple of socks for myself this year. This one I actually cast on in 2021 in November, and then in the spring of this year I finished them. They are the sweet dumpling socks, I believe. I will link all the patterns that I use in the description, so you can, if you see something that you really like, you can knit it yourself. These are the sweet dumpling socks. I made them in store-bought yarn. I can't think of the name right now. Yes, thank you, editing Jente. I also made a pair of lovely hand-spun socks. These are just a bit of... If you saw last week's video, if you didn't, it's over here or in the description, you saw me spin up yarn from a couple of very scrappy bats. This is exactly the same thing I did with exactly the same yarn, although I will be completely honest with you, this is not from the yarn I spun in that video. I made this one previously, but these are actually these are my favorite pairs of socks. I have worn them on a 18-kilometer hike and my feet were comfortable. The mix of fibers is mostly spotted sheep with some Flemish sheep incorporated. It is not merino soft, but they are sturdy and exactly what I need in socks. From the same blend, I also made these really big Never Enough Dragons socks. They're actually a little bit too big for me to actually use as socks in shoes. So they mostly get used as like really comfortable in-house socks, but I need to remember to weave in the ends on this one. I have been too lazy for this, even though these socks I think finished already in November. But this was a really cool pattern. Originally, actually they are from a knit along. I did not knit along, but I used the pattern from the knit along. There is a really pretty variation of lace stitches on this sock, although I think I would love these socks more if they didn't have the lace pattern or if they had other yarn. I don't think the really scrappy blended yarn fits well with the lace pattern. But anyway, they are really comfortable for when it's really cold and I want really warm feet. Then there are some stuff I do not have in my pile, but I can still talk about. Firstly, one of my colleagues had a little baby daughter and I made her a little cardigan. That one is called the Autumn Cardigan, I believe. And I made it from, again, hand-spun yarn, hand-dyed with Campash or Brazil wood. Speaking of babies, 2022 also saw the birth of a really cute baby boy, who I knitted this baby bear bonnet, actually called the Bearly bonnet. And then a couple of weeks ago you also saw that I knit and crochet some ornaments for my Christmas tree. Now, onto the big stuff. Actually, the first thing I finished in 2022 is no longer with us today. It is the first iteration of my cycling sweater, which, as I explained in the video on my second cycling sweater, the yarn I spun for that was way too big and heavy, so the sweater wasn't comfortable, so I completely unraveled that, started a new one, and that is this one. It is absolutely one of my favorite things to wear. I feel so fancy. and I am criminally strutting around hallways when I'm wearing this. It is made with handspun, both textile fleece and... I have learned how to pronounce this. Tessellate fleece. Tessellate fleece. And also some mystery fleece, which I spun up during Tour de Fleece. And before you can say I am a completely selfish knitter, I also spun up and knit a sweater for my husband. Oh my god, can I get this in the screen? Why is my husband such a giant? So yeah, this is the Sjöbris. I cannot speak any of the Scandinavian languages, so please excuse my pronunciation. The Sjöbris sweater by Garn Studio, Garn Studio. I hand spun the yarn and hand dyed it with all kinds of dye stuff. I actually can't remember all the dye stuff. There is some walnut peels in there, I think some annatto, some onion skins. The black is actually Ouessant yarn, all the rest is Flemish sheep. A hand spun, hand knit sweater for my husband. This one actually is still a surprise, so I will not say a lot about it, but I knit it in 2022 as well, so it gets featured. This is spotted sheep yarn. It is the party top by Abby Knits, and all the other details you need to know about this sweater you will see in next week's video. Around Easter I spun up a beautiful brown Ouessant fleece and I knit the Värendal cardigan with it. And the Värendal cardigan is absolutely my favorite cardigan ever, so when I knit this one up around Easter, I need a second one in September. With the leftovers of the yarn I had spun for the second cycling sweater. I have a video about this one as well. You know what to do, click that link. So yeah, these Värendal cardigans are absolutely my favorite pieces that I made. Maybe a close call with the cycling sweater. But these are the ones that get the most wear, that's for sure. And then another cardigan I made is the bookish cardigan. When I saw this pattern coming online on Ravelry, I was like, I need to make this. Mostly because, well, my brother-in-law was dating a girl around that time, and once she visited my in-laws with a beautiful yellow cable knit sweater with all these beautiful bubbles, and I was like, give that sweater. And then when this one came around, beautiful cables and bubbles, I knit it up immediately. It knit up very fast and very easy, although engaging enough, because I get a little bit bored by some patterns. I used some vintage buttons that were gifted to me by my grandmother. The yarn is again hand spun and hand dyed. All kinds of yellows and greens, a little bit of orange as well. I can't for the life of me remember what I dyed it with. But this one is a really cozy one. I think it's a little bit too boxy for my taste to wear it as much as the Värendal cardigans. But great layering piece. Especially now in winter, whenever I need a layer of extra warmth, this is my go-to. In the beginning of the year I got a bag of black alpaca fleece and I knit first off this little vest out of it. It's a Tryst vest. I actually don't wear it that much. I think I worn it when it was finished and then it hasn't left my cloth. I actually don't know why. It's quite neat. So I'll just wear it for the remainder of the video now. And well, I only made this small vest for myself with that black alpaca because my husband was like, black alpaca, I need a sweater out of it now. And because I love my husband, I listened to him and made him a sweater. But also because he is humongous, I could not make an entire sweater out of that black alpaca. So I made a gradient one. I started with the black at the bottom, then added some Ouessant fleece, and to the end also added white alpaca and white Flemish sheep. Actually, this is a bit of the first cycling sweater that got unraveled and then reused in this one. I have learned from this sweater, which is the stone cable sweater again by Garn Studio, that I will never ever in my life knit a bottom-up sweater for my husband again, because the fear of it not being big enough was so encompassing. I was really fearing I had to unravel the yoke and like add pieces to the body and the sleeves. Luckily I didn't have to, and it was the exact right size, but that just brought too much stress for me. Top-down sweaters from now on only for him. But I'm quite pleased with how this one came out, even though the cables are not very clear in the dark parts, but I think it's a really cool sweater. And apparently I forgot a pair of socks. So this is also another pair of scrap socks. One day I was feeling really like blue and sad, and I felt like I needed to just spin everything that I ever dyed into one big colorful mass, and that's what I did with these socks. They are just a colorful amalgamation of Flemish sheep wool again. Flemish sheep is my go-to. Well, as you have seen, and if you haven't, here's another thing in the corner. I got a bag of 30 kilos of Flemish sheep wool, so I've got lots to spin and work through. Yeah, so that was it. A quick, dirty, fast video on everything I knit in 2022. Hold up, Jente. You cannot wrap this video up just yet. You have forgotten one thing. We also spun, dyed and knit Flemish sheep for the source of that Flemish sheep, which is our local farmer. How could I have forgotten about that project while it is actually the most popular video I ever made on this channel? I mean, that's what you get when you're a chaos goblin and then your brain just goes like... Anyway, Jente, you can go back to the wrapping up of this video. I hope it gave you some inspiration. I also hope it doesn't make you feel bad about yourself, because I knit a lot. I don't have children. My husband does a lot around the house, so I have time to knit. I also don't get car sickness, so I can knit in the car while driving for a holiday. This is more than 15 items. But don't feel bad if you haven't knitted much this year. This is not a benchmark you should hold yourself to. I like the challenge for myself, but if you only finished or only started one thing this year or last year, that's good enough. You're knitting. And if you don't knit and just like seeing what I do, that's good enough. That's actually just perfect. I hope you feel encouraged by seeing what I do and not discouraged. Because I am aware that seeing so many projects made in a year can make some people feel like an imposter, like they're not doing good enough, and that is not what I want to make you feel. So I hope you got inspired by this, and I hope you saw something that maybe you would try yourself. I also hope you like this kind of fiber shenanigans, and if you do, you could maybe like, comment or subscribe, but that is all up to you. And as for me, I will see you in a next video, which, as I have spoiled before, will feature some more knitting. Bye!